Quick, you are in a hostage negotiation situation. Someone that you know's life is on the line. How are you gonna get out of this situation? How are you gonna talk this person out of it? The answer, surprisingly, is in this book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Covey. Welcome back everybody to Biz Gorilla. I'm your host, Jason Catalano, and on this channel, we look to give you the best business advice from the best business books so that you can build your brand at low to no cost. And for today, we're gonna be going over Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's one of the classic self-development books, and it's really one of the few books I recommend anybody read, and it's a very, very simple philosophy. So, who is this for? This is definitely for, I would say, teenagers, young adults, definitely younger people. It's very basic what he talks about. It's kind of a little bit of stoicism. It's basically what it is. It's all about personal development in terms of the self, how you deal with others, and then kind of around you, the systems that affect both of those. And I would say, where do we see this a lot? I know a lot of people like Damon John, Mark Cuban, a lot of big time entrepreneurs, they actually mention this book as one of their favorite books in terms of just their overall self-development, philosophy, psychology, all of it. They base a lot of it out of this book. And of course, why do they do that? Because it's really simple. It's easy to understand the basic principles in here, and it's easy to apply them, and yet it's going to give you dividends. It's going to give you great results right away. So with that, the big idea of this book definitely comes from a quote from Aristotle. It is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, it is a habit. So if excellence is a habit, how do we build habits? And that's really where this book goes into. What are the core habits that are going to build the foundations for whatever endeavors you do to be successful? And he says that habits are the intersection of your knowledge, your desire, where your passions are, and then also what your skill sets are. So it's the intersection of all three of those. And really from a big idea perspective, it's the foundational works for just how you treat other people, how you look at yourself, and how you do things like prioritize and goal setting and everything like that. And with that, there's actually 3 main points that I got out of this book, and that was to have a private victory, to have a public victory, and then the systems around it balance. Okay, so for the first point, private victory. What I really, really like about what he talks about here is to be proactive, not reactive. And just from a concept, he talks about how there's some sort of stimulus that comes, and that there's a choice we have before there's a response. It's one of the things that makes us human, actually, is that we have this ability to choose what our action's going to be, okay? A lot of times with animals, you can condition them to where it's just every time you have a stimulus, there's a response. For instance, when I was in the military working dog program out in Afghanistan, that's exactly what we did, right? When a dog hears a command, stimulus, we want a very specific response, which means that over training, anytime they hear a command, either they do what you want, you reward, or if they don't, you punish, right? You always had the leash on. But coming back to the real world, what this does for you guys is that it's just the idea of taking ownership of all the results of your life. Sure, there's a lot of bad things that happen to all of us, right? Maybe we didn't get into the school we wanted because we had the grades, we had this. We just weren't the right person for it, right? It's out of your control, right? And he talks about that in terms of the sphere of what's things that are in your control is your sphere of influence. And he just says that when you first start off in life, the sphere of influence is very small, and that there's a lot of things out of your control that affect you, but you can't necessarily directly affect it. And the best way he explained it was, what you want to do over your life is, if this is your sphere of influence, he's saying that when you begin life, there's all of this that you do not control, right? And he's just saying that over time, what you can do is as you skill up, as you develop more knowledge, as you become more, you can create more energy, right? To devote this sphere of influence that you can control we try to just move this as far up as possible, right? In every single direction. And this is kind of what personal development tries to accomplish, is this idea that your sphere of influence, you can expand it so that everything you do, everything you do care about and worry, actually has some sort of direct causation to your life. And so when he says be proactive, it's mostly just take control of your life. You own the results, you own your life, no one else does. Understand what's around you, but also understand what you can control, what you can't control. And the things you can control, that's going to lead us to the point number 2, which is, you want to begin with the end in mind, right? So once you figure out that I own my life, well then where do I want my life to go? So in the second habit, he talks about beginning with the end in mind. And a good story about this is actually in the military, it's one of the core commander's intent. It's one of the few things that we say that on every single mission, you're always trying to say, at the end of the day, how should this thing look? How should our environment look? How should this mission go? Like, as long as you can communicate what is the end goal, what is the end journey, what is the final destination point, everything going up to that is negotiable. Everything up to that is really just a tactic, a methodology, and that you kind of have to just adjust on the fly. But you have to at least have somewhere that you're going. And a good example of this is, imagine you're in Kansas, middle of the country, and you say, you know what, let's go on spring break, let's go on vacation. Now you and your buddies, right, have a couple of options you can do, right? You can say, oh, spring break, let's say you want to go out of the country entirely, we're gonna go all the way down to Cancun, right? You can say, hey, let's go to Mexico, right? So as you can see here, Cancun, Mexico. Sure, that's an option. That's one of those things we talk about beginning with the end in mind. One of your friends says, no, I want to go to LA, baby. Let's go to Hollywood, right? Let's go to Hollywood. I want to see the glitz, the glamour. Maybe we hit up Vegas somewhere along the route. And then you have another buddy that says, you know what? I want to go to Florida. Let's go to Miami, somewhere over here, right? Let's go to Miami. Beaches, babes, all that kind of good stuff, right? I would rather go down to Miami, go to Florida. And you have a problem here, which is that it doesn't really matter whether or not we drive or fly to any of these. It's not really, you can go over the details, you could say which one's better, more time consuming, but the very first thing you have to do is figure out which location do I want to go to? What's my final destination? And what does that final destination look like in terms of what we want, okay? Would we rather go to LA, where it's gonna be more about looking up Hollywood, Disneyland, it's more about the glitz and the glamour, everything you see on TV and everything, so it's more like a tourist place. Would you rather go down to Cancun, where it's a lot cheaper, it's more of a place to party, right? And it's out of the country. So you're gonna get a much more cultural difference there. Cool, that's one of the end in mind. What's another place? Miami, right? The core thing with Miami is nightlife, maybe you wanna go on beaches, you really wanna entertain those a little bit. But all 3 destinations are gonna give you wildly different end states. And so all Stephen Covey's saying is, what you really want to do is first figure out which one of those we're going to get to, right? And once we figure that out, then we can backwards plan and say, well, how am I going to get there? Because there's thousands of ways to get to a lot of these places. And each one has its own pros and cons. But if all 3 of us want to go to 3 different locations, guess what happens? If we all 3 don't agree on what the final location is, we all stay stuck in Kansas. So that's saying we're not in Kansas anymore? That's wrong. Clearly you're gonna stay in Kansas. So with that being said, go ahead and think about in your life, what is the end state? And a lot of times in business, I like to think of this as, if our company was at its best, if we were in perfect state at the end of it, where's the customer at in their life? Where are we at as a company? And that is that's our ultimate goal, right? That is our mission statement, is there. And anything that derails us off from that is not gonna be tolerated. You need to be one side focused. What is that end? What is the end goal? That's where we need to drive to. Okay, so now that you know where you want to drive to, what your end location is, you already assume responsibility. The next part that I really liked about this book is he talks about putting first things first. So now that we know which location we want to go to, Well, how are we going to get there? Well, what's our priority? Is it money? Is it time? Is it the experience, right? You could take a road trip from Kansas all the way to LA and you hit through Las Vegas, and that road trip itself is an experience. Maybe it costs more money, maybe it costs more time, right? So this is what we mean by put the first things first. You have to be able to prioritize, right? And a great example of this, I think, is actually in the military, where physical training, PT, is the first thing we do every single morning. It's back at basic training, we used to have the drill sergeants, 5 o'clock, 4:30 wake up, 5 o'clock out in PT formation, and we're humming, we're rolling every day. 5 o'clock, we're out doing some sort of physical activity for an hour or more. And the reason why we do that is because in the military, we believe that that's the most foundational thing to everything we do, is that you have to be at least a certain physical fitness level so that you can get in the fight. So if we prioritize that, that means every day we're going to attack that first. Before the day gets chaotic, before the day gets, crazy, right? Before we have to go answer a bunch of emails and put out fires here and there, you have to first work on that core central thing that's going to progress you towards the end state. And then if you do that every single day, you're going to slowly start building towards that. And that's the goal. And, Dr. Covey talks about a bunch of quadrants, but basically saying is that when you attack the most important things early in the day, get them out of the way first. And now when you have those kind of urgent but maybe not as important things come up that you really have to just deal with, or urgent and important, you can deal with them knowing in the back of your head you're making those long-term goals, like you're actually getting that done. And that was a big takeaway for me, is that a lot of entrepreneurs especially, they do that, right? They do the first thing in the morning, say, what's the number one thing I got to get done today for that long-term goal? Is it review accounting financials, right? To see where we can lower expenses? Is it looking over marketing plans? How are we going to grow, right? Is it maybe even taking your son or your daughter to work? Is that a priority? You really want family time? Whatever it is, you have to put that as the first thing. Because if you don't, there's a good chance it's just going to get lost in the wash for the rest of the day. Okay, so the second main point is the public victory. And the public victory just has to do with how you deal with other people. And the first thing he talks about here is habit number 4, which is thinking win-win, right? And a great example of thinking win-win, I think, is actually Ty Lopez. He actually talked about a situation where he says, okay, you're gonna go buy a business from a pizza joint, local pizza joint. And you initially evaluate this pizza joint at, let's just say, $360,000, right? That's what it's valued at. But what he was saying was, I don't have $360,000 to buy that business, right? But I want the business. I think I can really, use a lot of internet marketing tactics, just do more modernization of it. I can make more money than what they're currently doing, which you realize the owner's making about 10 grand a month. When you think win-win, you think, okay, how do I get this business at a lower rate than $360,000 right now? And yet also, how do I convince them that it's a good deal? And what Ty said, which was really cool, he said, what you do is you propose to them, you say, look, I'm gonna take this business off your hands and I'm gonna pay you $10,000 a month. So you are no worse than you're at right now, only you can go spend time with the family, you can go start another business, you can go fishing, you can go take those trips with the RV, right? You got 10 grand a month coming in passive income. And I'm gonna do this for 36 months, 3 years. So you're still hitting that $360,000, okay? But you have no risk, right? Or very little risk. And he said, look, 9 out of 10 business owners are probably gonna be like, I don't know, man, I really just want the money right now. But you're gonna get one. And that one's gonna think, you know what? I'd rather just spend time with my grandkids. I'd rather go fishing. I'd rather just not deal with the stress of the business every day. And to be honest with you, 10 grand a month, I can live off that. So for that one person, that is a win, right? For them, even though they'd rather have the money right now, that concept and their idea of spending more time with the grandkids, that's a win. You just won because you didn't spend $360,000. In fact, you spent nothing to own that business. Right? Because let's say he's making 10 grand right now, you think you can up that to 25, 30 grand a month. You pay him the 10, you keep the 20, everyone wins, it's a win-win. So I really love that habit of just thinking negotiations, what is it that the other person really wants? And to answer the question in terms of negotiation tactics, this is how hostage negotiators do it all the time. What is it that the other party really wants? And you do a lot of intelligence probes to try and figure out, what do they want? And how can I actually legitimately give them? Do they really want the $5 million? Or do they want, their mom to have cancer treatment? Or do they really want just financial freedom? Whatever that true inside value, thing that they value, that's what you have to be able to propose to them. And it may be something that you don't, as a business, you might be like, yeah, whatever. Like, I don't really care about spending time with grandkids. But for that person, that might be like really, really high up their value system that you're allowing them to get. So always think, how do I propose things in a way that's win-win? And you're also gonna get a lot more trust. When people know what you're getting out of the deal and then what they're getting out of the deal, they trust the deal way more than if you're just selling them on, oh, this is what you're getting out of it, don't worry about me. Okay, so the next point he talks about is habit 5, which is seek first to understand, then be understood. And this is probably the worst thing in America we do, right? The American Western philosophy is no, you have to get your point across, you have to make sure somebody understands you, and then you have to win and dominate the conversation. And so what happens is both sides are just talking at each other, but nothing actually receives and goes to the brain. And we have all of this coming at us all the time of like, change your mind, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. You see it in politics all the time. And it's the worst thing you can do. Okay, first what you want to do is you always want to first think, what is the other side actually trying to communicate to me? And they're probably just doing a terrible job of it, because I do a terrible job communicating myself, right? We always talk too much, we're not clear with our words, we're not concise with them. We don't really think about the definition of words really well. So we just have to think, a lot of times people are just lost in the communication. So first, just ask to clarify. And once you really understand where people are coming from and what they want you to understand, usually it's not the worst thing possible. That's one of the habits I always think, is first, understand somebody clearly. Where are they coming from? What are they really saying? What is it that they really want? And once you can figure that out, then you can start saying, okay, this is where I think you're from. This is my counter. And so I always say that in business, that your customers are going to tell you what they want, but then they're going to show you what they really want. I just love that in terms of business. First, before we put our opinion on what the market should want, let's first figure out, what does the market actually want? What is it that they're actually desiring? And let's attack that first. Let's go after that. Okay, so habit number 6 is he's talking about synergy and cooperation, and creative cooperation amongst a lot of different activities. This is something to me that's a little bit too 90s. I'm not really, and as a habit, I think it's more just understanding that life is not linear, okay? In general, life isn't like this, right? It's not like 1 + 1 equals 2, and then, plus 1 gets you to 3. That's just not how life works, right? I mean, we all understand that life definitely works a lot more, whether it's the business or not. It's kind of, like this. You're generally trending up, maybe some downfalls, but then when all the right activities are going forward, when you put in the time in, you're perfecting your systems, that's when all of a sudden the graph of your life might start to really exponentially go up, right? And that's kind of what synergy is just saying, is that this whole point up to here, the inflection point, you just have to accept that it's gonna be up, it's gonna be down, but until you can get to a certain point where everything in your life is kind of coming together, you're gonna be kind of like at that 0 point. But once it comes together, it happens quick. It happens really, really quick, where you just bam, things start to click, you start to make a lot of money, money starts making money, your life starts to become better, eating better choices, you're able to work out more, like that's the synergy effect. And so it's just saying that, and this goes to the point 7, which is actually balance, right? When you actually have all these things balanced and you value the diversity of all these functions of your life, that's when you start getting that really high inflection point. So it's just saying, don't be discouraged if you're not getting results as quickly as you want, because in a lot of ways, it's just time hasn't gone on enough. Your systems in your life aren't good enough yet to get that synergy. And so he's just saying, don't worry about profits, don't worry about how good the business is doing, because it's kind of an all or nothing thing. Either the business is going to take off, right? Because once you get more money, you can put more money into advertising, you put more money into your product, you can put more money into networking, and then you're gonna start seeing it's gonna go way, way up. So in a lot of ways, I like to think of synergy as just the sum is greater than the parts, and that you just have to be patient in life sometimes and just trust the process. And in terms of balance, he talks a lot about mental and spiritual and social connection with people, but I like to think of it as you can't just be really good at one of these things. Like, you can't just have like the perfect body, never talk to people, never read books, never mentally do anything. All you do is work out all day. That's also not a good life, right? And I just like how he says that. He says it's not that you have to be average at all of them, but he says you can't just be deficient, too low in any one of those four categories of physical, mental, social, and then spiritual. And I thought that was really important in terms of just in your life thinking, okay, I have to at least be good enough in all those areas. Maybe I'm more focused on the spiritual right now. Maybe I'm more focused on connecting with family and friends right now. Maybe I'm more focused on the mental aspect, making more money, right? So you can be more focused on one, but don't let one get so low that it's gonna affect the others and be synergy the other way. All right, everyone, so that was the book summary of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Just to sum it up, private victory, be proactive, begin with the end in mind. Habit 3, put first things first. You definitely want to do things on the public end. What do you want to do? Think win-win. You want to also think about synergy, and then you also want to think about, understanding people and then being understood. That's what I took out of the book. I think it's one of the better books out there. You can internalize these things really simply. And go ahead in your own life, think about, where am I going to use this book, right? How in business am I going to leverage synergy? How am I going to be proactive with my life? Just think about these questions. Comment down below how you're going to use this book in your life. And then don't forget to subscribe if you want more better business advice from the best business books. Click that subscribe button. I'm Jason Catalano, signing off.